Ako urong dito, and I said I would stake my honor, my life, and even the presidency.
We can't go into much detail because this belongs to ASEAN. But I'd really like to emphasize this. The Philippines welcomed the launching of the ASEAN Prize, and we were deeply, truly deeply honored, and I mean this personally, that the premier award was given to Ms. Linda Uy Ko, whose work with the ASEAN Society Philippines and the ASEAN Autism Network has really touched the lives of people with autism and their families across the region. That's something really important, at least as far as I'm concerned. There was during the ASEAN, there's always mention of the help that ASEAN gave whenever calamities struck this or that ASEAN region. So that was a common that was a common theme, and a commitment at which we're, by the way, very good at disaster preparedness and disaster relief. By the way, I come from the United Nations, and after all is said and done, they said we did very, very well in the Yolanda relief. And of course, in the last one, we had countries coming to me when I was there in the UN, crossing the aisle and congratulating me at the perfect response our government had. Well, not just the government, actually. Most of the local government units, community groups had to the disaster that struck. So apparently we're very good at this. And the other themes were on infrastructure development, especially in the ASEAN Korea Summit. And of course, that's a major theme of our own government. But the theme that really, the first, the second to the most important is the challenge of terrorism and violent extremism with actually almost every country weighing in on it. Mahathir, as usual, the grand old man of ASEAN, Southeast Asian diplomacy and statesmanship, explained the whole of, I know we call it in the UN, there's a slogan, whole of society, whole of government approach. Well, he meant it. He said you have to address the roots of terrorism. But in that context, we also pointed out that the Philippines, in retaking Marawi, set a standard for all the militaries in the world to follow. It was described in the Security Council as a near textbook perfect military victory. We're very proud of that. There was, above all, the main concern seemed to be about growing protectionism, in the world, in trade. That seemed to be their main concern, especially since ASEAN is coming close to the conclusion of certain trade agreements, RCEP, which comes at the right time, just when protectionist tendencies and trade tensions are rising. We seem to have been working on this for 12 years. And Philippine message is, the message of almost everyone was that we've come this far, let's not undo what we have taken so long to get done. So that, I think, will be hopefully concluded next year, 2019. And there was a desire for the code of conduct to govern navigation in the South China Sea. And I think I saw a tweet somewhere saying, really, 3 years? Yeah, really, 3 years. Because it has to be agreed to by everyone. And that seems to be, as far as I was told, going rather amicably well. And as I said, in that context, the RCEP is 12 years already, right? Well, we're not trying to aim for that. We're trying to make it faster. But again, consensus and on the RCEP and other, trade agreements, again, the theme would come up each country is at a different stage or level of development. That one size fits all prescription might be a bit too harsh on the less developed countries, and that was freely admitted. China came up with the best recipe. Said, sure, we all do this in the spirit of pragmatism. We address every situation as it arises. So if there are any other if there are questions now, please. I'm more comfortable with that. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am? Ma'am. Yes, oh, okay. Yeah. That's okay. I can hear you. Yes.
Interested to know about how the code of conduct was discussed during the meetings, what the Philippines actually said, and if you may, how the other countries reacted to the discussion about the code of conduct and the 3-year timetable that we are now working on. If there are any concerns or...
Yeah, let me address that. Why keep saying 3 years? Because that, I believe, is the span of our coordination, the Philippine coordinatorship. That's why it's 3 years. Certainly can't talk about longer than that because that's our mandate. That's the reason the 3 years has come up. But the sentiment of the Philippines, as expressed by President Duterte, is please come do it as quickly as you can, but of course you can't rush these things. But that is his sentiment, and I think he was the one who urged for a faster faster developments in this area. The others, again, were committed. Of course, they felt that it's important to have the code of conduct. But the one who stressed the speed at which it should be accomplished was President Duterte.
Sir, China also mentioned 3 years. So we coordinated the 3-year timetable with China?
No, it's the term of that we are given. That's not a deadline. That's the term we have as coordinators, 3 years. If it goes beyond that, then I guess there will be a new coordinator. And I don't know how long they're given. 3 years, I guess, no? Again, 3 years. So it's not the timetable for concluding the COC. It's the period of time where we, the Philippines, has its coordinatorship. Yes.
Afternoon, sir. Ron Kalunsod, sir, of Kyodo News, Japanese
Yes.
News, sir. So on the COC, sir, I'm just curious if during the ASEAN-US summit, was there a mention on the specific reported proposal by China in that draft COC where ASEAN and China supposedly should require their own approval before a foreign military can conduct activities like drills or exercises in the South China Sea? Did they go to that specific?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, I don't even know if that was a real concern. I mean, if it actually exists or was just, speculation from someone out there. But no, it wasn't brought up. But again, the COC was mentioned, but it was mentioned as if it was a given that it should be, we should have that. Again, the Philippines emphasized at the soonest possible time.
Was there an expression of welcome, sir, by Philippines and other ASEAN countries for U.S. to continue conducting freedom of navigation during that ASEAN-U.S. summit?
I think that was, well, I better not give names of the people who attribute. The freedom of navigation theme was universal.
Okay.
And then that it should include everything, all kinds of vessels. There was absolutely no distinction made.
I asked that, sir, because before coming into the summit, President Duterte said in a doorstep interview that he's against the military drills in the South China Sea because it will
Well,
cause
I think
friction.
here I have to I believe it's a matter of courtesy at the moment that you can postpone those things if there are pending visits. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. Raymond Tinasa, Bombo Radio. Sir, during the ASEAN-China summit, was there any mention of the alleged 3 weather station being set up by China at the disputed territories?
No, there wasn't any.
Sir, just to clarify, during the...
I don't even know if there are weather stations. I'd like to.
So no mention.
Apparently, media knows about it, but nobody else seems to.
So just to clarify the ambush interview of the president earlier, wherein he was asked if, do you think it's wise to hold military drills in the South China Sea? Then the president responded, no, because it's not military drills, because I said China is already in possession. It's now in their hands. So why do you...
I was not present at that ambush, so I don't really know what happened there. Yeah. Next time, ambush me. Okay.
So, but just to clarify and put on record that
Yes.
the Philippine government is not giving up any of the...
Absolutely not. I have repeatedly said not an inch, nor an iota of sovereignty. That was my... I keep saying it. I said it also in the UN. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Follow-up question.
Yes.
Question?
There's a... Oh, okay. There.
Hi, sir. Sir, a follow-up question on the weather stations.
Yeah, go ahead. Go
Yes,
ahead.
sir.
I
Are there
get it.
efforts by the Philippine governments to at least verify these reports that China has installed and are starting to operate these weather
You'd have to ask Lawrence Sanada, but I believe you should first verify it yourselves. If you heard that, it's very easy to just fly over it. Don't you have that capability? I mean, that's a story, and we can't keep answer. That's only my view. We can't respond to something that just pops up in the internet. Have you seen it? I mean, apparently it can be done
No,
by
sir,
media.
but the Foreign Ministry of China actually announced that
Okay,
there
good.
are.
Good. So then, and they call them weather stations, right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, well, there it is. You take their word for it then.
So what's
right?
ours?
You do? I don't get it. What do you want us to do? I mean, so China announced it has put up weather stations? Oh, fine.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then
So what's our response to that, sir?
to weather stations? Well, there it is. Weather stations. I don't think they're claims of ownership, they're claims of sovereignty, they're weather stations. I'd have to ask, I'd ask the military later what they feel about it.
Don't you think, sir, that these developments in the Spratlys and the disputed islands actually complicate the situation in the
That's
South
the
China
theme.
Sea?
That's the theme of most talks, that these things complicate the situation, along with responses by Western powers also complicate the situation. Again, I cannot quote the wise man who said it, but he said, we should really try to de-escalate tensions there because it's not getting us anywhere.
So are we expecting any type of protest from the Philippine government, sir, with these types of,
No, I
with these
prefer to talk. In
developments?
fact, when I was in the UN, they would keep asking me to file note verbals. I said no, I call that notes verbiage. Every time you send a note verbal and no one responds to it, what does that look like? When you keep sending those notes, I know some people say, well, you just keep sending them. What I keep calling it is banging your head against the wall. What we do is, as I have done there in the UN, is assert our rights under the Hague Tribunal decision under UNCLOS. I don't send notes verbals to people who don't even answer to it. Let them do it if they want, the critics back home.
So you believe, sir, that mga protests ngayon will not do
Well, they
anything?
can go ahead and protest. It's free. It's a free country. But mine is that I would stand up in the UN and I would assert what were our rights, what was the nature of the Hague Tribunal decision, and UNCLOS, to which both China and the Philippines subscribe.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, sir. Good
Yes,
afternoon.
yes,
Sir
absolutely.
Joseph Morongpa from GMA7.
Oh, great.
How are you doing?
Okay.
You blocked me on Twitter already.
Yes.
Sir, I'm not sure you heard that.
What?
I was following you before on Twitter and you
Oh,
blocked
great.
me.
I did.
You did.
Oh,
Anyway,
sorry.
sir. Can you
Teach me
unblock
how
me so I
to-
can monitor you?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I don't know how to do that.
Just go through.
Frankly, I don't.
Later, sir.
Twitter was put up by my daughter
Maybe that's
to
the
give me
daughter who
something
blocked me.
to.
Anyway,
to
sir.
know. Yeah, I will.
Sir, going back to the weather stations, so it's a non-issue for us, even if China.
I wouldn't say that. That has not been cleared. I'd like to get Secretary of Defense to tell me. You guys claim there is a weather station out there. I suggest you guys fly there. Why not? I mean, that's what I'll tell you. That's what I did as a journalist. When there was a conflict in Mindanao, I took my team into the battlefield on the way to Abu Bakar, and that's how we did it in the old days.
So with regard to the U.S. ASEAN summit,
That went very well, I'll tell you that.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
can you?
And Mike Pence was extremely convincing. He spoke very well. He seemed to have a complete grasp of the different issues. Again, the main theme was, well, trade, which seems to be defining, the landscape today, especially in ASEAN, which is devoted to the economic development of all the countries in the region. So again, he spoke very well on it.
Sir, in the context of the South China Sea issue, no, in his opening speech, he said that an empire has no place in the area.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
All right. So, do you think that is pertaining to China?
I don't want to interpret his words, but I do know that the first empire. Well, let me put it this way. Okay, let me ask you a question. From when did the Americans and the American fleet enter the Pacific? 1898 maybe, when they came in. At any rate, after the Maine blew up in Havana Harbor. What would you call the American presence in the Pacific since then to the present? What would you call it?
It could
Nothing?
be for some people. It could be invasion or
People to people?
No, if for some people, I said.
No,
Could be-
but what would you call the American presence here?
My opinion does not matter, sir. I'm a reporter.
Yeah, it would be. Well, they're the hegemon in the region, and so any talk of empire might even be self-referential. Who knows? Again, I advise you to read The Thucydides Trap by Graham Allison.
Sir, do you think that since we're negotiating the ASEAN and China are negotiating the COC, do you think it would be better for the U.S. to maybe give it some space and not make any statements that may
Well, insofar,
irritate China?
well, no, I think as a concerned party, remember, they have their own foreign policy. They have continually stressed freedom of navigation. It's important that we get their views, that they express them. Sure, it's between us and the littoral states of Southeast Asia, China, Japan, Korea. In Southeast Asia would be Vietnam, Philippines, and the Southeast Asian countries that have a coastline. So, but again, they're a major party. Not a major party, but a major protagonist in the area. So it would be nice to know what they feel about it, what they think about it.
So that's it for the meantime, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Secretary. Nestor Corrales from The Inquirer.
Oh, okay. Hi.
President Duterte urged ASEAN and China to exercise self-restraint in the South China Sea.
Yes,
So
that's right.
during the ASEAN-China summit, what is China's commitment to ASEAN that it would not build new reclamations and install military facilities in the disputed sea that could further raise tensions while we are...
China didn't say anything, but the president was very clear. Let's exercise restraint, and there was no response. Which is you can interpret it as you want, but it was rather bold of our president to bring it up. The use of the word restraint.
We didn't have any response from China with
Well,
regards...
China had its own. I can't understand that question. What do you want me to say? Ask China if what their reaction was to President Duterte's magnificent phrase, "Let us all exercise restraint." You should ask China that.
So there was no reaction from China with
China
regards
had
to
its
South...
own statement on the issues. Yes, they're in favor of pushing through with the code of conduct, and with I guess as fast as we can make it. Yeah.
just going
Yes.
back to your statement earlier about the note verbal. So does that mean that it's our policy now to
No,
make,
it's not a
like,
policy. It's
verbal
my
but
reaction
so-
when I was in the United Nations because they would keep telling me to do that. I have my own feeling that if you keep doing that and then there's nothing happens, if this keeps going on, it becomes a fact of life. And I'd like to keep things dangling in the legal sphere.
So while you were
to every complaint of whatever action they do, I assert what's ours, and that's I've done.
on a verbal,
Not on the verbal, on the
personally,
floor of the
on
GA.
floor,
Yeah, I
okay.
don't do things verbally there. They don't recognize you, by the way, if you speak in the corridor.
So while you
Yeah.
were in the UN,
United Nations,
you
yes.
were, and then well, but it was Washington who was supposed to be filing our note verbals, no? When if
I
there
don't
were
know.
issues
I don't know.
before,
I don't
it's
know
not
that. I'm
the
just
UN
in the.
representative. It's a Washington embassy that's supposed to be filing the note verbals, like during the Secretary Cayetano's time, because there were some issues before that. Supposedly, we filed note verbals.
Yes, and what was the result of doing that? Strengthened our claim. Did it? I don't know. By the way, one of the things I was taught by a very wise man who said, "Never assume that your predecessor was not doing the best he could, and that you are better." I accept that. Yeah.
Can I just ask one more question, sir?
Sure, you
so
can
now
ask two.
now that you're the Secretary of Foreign Affairs,
Yes.
will you be carrying on that decision that you did
We'll see.
during the?
We'll see. The situations change, but I don't know. I always favored asserting our. That was my approach in the UN. I guess I'll bring it to the Foreign Affairs.
Thank you.
There. Yes, there he is. Yes, you. Go ahead. No, him. There. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, sir. I'm Bim Santos from TV5 One News. Sir, you mentioned RCEP, and you also mentioned it has been going on now for quite some time, about 12 years. What is the sense now that?
Well,
that
again,
it will
I'll tell
actually
you, this is a regional trade agreement. 12 years. It shows that to arrive at consensus, it takes that long. They have had substantive progress, and yet the most vocal. Am I allowed to say this? Well, the most vocal, positions in the room were still bringing up the issue. We are not as rich as the rest of you. Will you make allowances for those of us who are not that rich
Who are
as you
these,
come to these free trade agreements?
Who were these?
Oh,
sir?
I'd rather not say it because that's not allowed. But obviously, we have different levels of economic development. And free trade may be harder on others than it is on those who are much better off.
So what is
So
the
you can
sense
see,
now?
12 years later, that remains. Concerns about that. I wish I could tell you more. Some of the points were raised very eloquently by them, but just put it this way: you know that there are different levels of development, and those issues continue to be raised. 12 years down the, up the road, we'd like to put it, and they're still being raised. I mean, there are people who'll say, well, in the long run, when everything works out, everyone, it's like the rising tide raising all boats. But in the short run, I guess your boat will capsize. So that's the thing. And that's what I tell you. That's why the strength of ASEAN is it's a consensus. I myself, as a journalist, was rather impatient for consensus. I prefer majority. But no, that's why we're the most vibrant regional organization. We don't go farther than the weakest of our members is willing to go. Yeah.
So, sir, with these various issues, what is the sense or level of confidence that this will actually be finalized by next year?
And then next year, as they're hoping.
As they're hoping.
Those who were satisfied with it did not say much. Those who still felt that they had not attained that level of development to compete, equally with the rest of us, I guess will still raise their misgivings, and we will listen to them. Because it's a consensus-building organization. So we'll do that.
Sir, on another
Yes,
issue.
sure.
Sir, you went in the president's stead in the number of meetings that
Yes,
he
yeah.
did not attend. Is this a missed opportunity, or in terms of
Not at all.
optics, does it send
Those
something?
are statements, including mine, and you know how I am with statements. I make my own. But those statements are prepared by the experts because they address or confirm what has been already arrived at. And I could read it, he could read it, Secretary Lopez could read it. It wouldn't make a difference. Because these are already affirmations of what we all know we have already agreed to by consensus in the ASEAN.
This was not a concern.
And then, of course, he had these bilaterals. He had. He also has to attend, as I also have to disappear to attend to issues coming up in my office. You know, immigration issues, OFW issues. I still have to. I wake up to that. Then I have to attend to that. Yes. Pardon? Yeah. Well. Yes. Go ahead.
Just going back a little bit on Vice President Pence. Did the President and Mr. Pence have an occasion to talk? And if you're privy to what they talked about?
No, I was no, I don't. Did they? Well, yesterday I met. I just extended the greetings of the President to Vice President Pence because I went in the President's stead at the gala dinner.
Also, I monitored something that you said that the UN ambassador, U.S. ambassador
Yes.
to the UN, Nikki Haley,
Yes.
when she asked you when the president is going to the U.S.,
That's right.
you said that the condition is return the Balangiga.
Yeah, well, she asked. We were talking about the other Asian groups were a bit, upset at how the U.S. seems to be disengaging from the UN, and so I held a lunch and invited her to answer those concerns, and she did rather well. And she said, perhaps President Trump does not like the rest of the world. And she said, the UN. She says he's coming here and he wants to stay a whole week to interact with the UN. And then she turned to me and she says, "What about your president? Why doesn't he come here? He's been invited." I said, "He won't come unless we get back the Balangiga bells." And she said, "The Balangiga bells?" I said, "Yes, it's about 3 bells that we rang when we were going to ambush the U.S. cavalry, and we rang it, and they killed us." And so she said she took it down. And later on, throughout the year, she would call me to the aside and say, "Okay, I brought it up with Mattis," and Mattis said, "As far as the Defense Department is concerned, we're okay." And then said, in the course of that, you have to research. By the way, let's not take all the credit for this. There are people like Hank Hendrickson, who was assigned here before, a true friend of Filipinos. They're working on it meanwhile. And they said, well, there's one little resolution in Congress which has to be addressed. And apparently, when I got here, and while I was here, that has been addressed and the bells are coming back. Now, the point of that was I reminded everyone that I said, by the way, when this was raised, I said, he won't go there until the Balangiga bells are returned. Well, they're coming back. So he will have to go there.
Oh, yeah?
To the United States, I would think.
If
That's the condition you made.
You've raised it with the president?
Yes,
So-
yes.
and he's
He
okay,
laughed. He smiled. He said yes.
But not committed to going.
Well,
Not yet.
Who?
But he said yes to going to the U.S.
Well, to me, I mean, he says, so you know, sir, that now that we're getting the bells, and in the context of my conversations with Haley, he says, so he smiled. He says, so
Sir-
yes,
sir,
he
just-
smiled.
Okay.
That happened today, sir.
No, the other night.
Sir, just one last point on the COC and the PCA
Yes,
ruling.
yes.
The president has always repeated that there is a right time, to raise the PCA ruling, our award.
Yes.
Do you think during the negotiations, the 3-year negotiation, is the right time for us to assert the award and factor it in the provisions of the COC?
I think we should leave that to the negotiators because it's not being given up. And of course, when you have the Secretary of Foreign Affairs saying that to the surprise of the Chinese, I said, yes, there are differences. Remember, I said that in Davao. Those differences may be resolved. Time may solve them, or perhaps never. But that is no reason why we cannot go around the differences or over them in order to cooperate on other areas where it is possible to do so to our mutual benefit. And that seems to be the attitude of all the ASEAN countries.
Sir, yes, sir. Sir, going back to the President's skipping of some of the events
Yes,
yesterday, the presidential spokesman said that actually the President did not miss much during the meetings that he skipped because all he had to do is to read the common statement.
Well, yes,
which he did.
these are these are scenarios where the experts have already arrived at their conclusions. This is studied by the DFA. This is studied by Malacañang, who prepares the President's statements, not us.
But doesn't that reflect poorly on the Philippines and also...
No, it doesn't. No, absolutely it doesn't. I can tell you that. I've seen different leaders stand up and leave, including the chairman.
Okay.
And it doesn't reflect badly. Then the secretary or their ministers of foreign affairs sit down. Right now, I won't mention again, but a major power wasn't there. And then the minister of, or the secretary, I don't know what they call them, Minister of Foreign Affairs sat in, and then he arrived. This morning, I sat in, and I sat down, and then I got a tap on my shoulder, and it was the President. He says, I'm here.
So it's not a statement naman of how we regard the talks and
No,
the
I
people
don't
that
know.
we're
I
talking
don't know
to.
why you would think, why anyone would think that. Not at all.
Kasi the President has been receiving so much flack na habang
Well,
there's a high-level meeting going on, he was
But this flack,
power napping.
this flack is not something that he invited. It came from, I guess, his enemies. So there you go. I mean, what can you do?
Sir, on the ruling of kasi critics again are saying that since we're not asserting it, parang it's tantamount to giving it up, and some are saying that we're giving it up.
That's what they're saying. The critics are saying, if you don't repeatedly assert it, you're giving it up. They don't know their law. I'm sorry. You know, not everyone went to a good school. But that's not true. It is now a part of international law. It's just there.
And
In fact, if you read the decision, you will realize it's a description of maritime features. That's what it is. And as I said, that description one day, and it is recognized, is applied in different countries, especially in Scandinavia, where all the fjords are, and there are reefs and other similar features. They're invoking that. In the Indian Ocean, that's being invoked. It is now a part of international law, and it's no longer, as I also said in my inaugural statement, I said, the purpose of going to the tribunal is to clarify a point of uncertainty. It was clarified, not only for us, but for the rest of the world that has similar topographical features, and for those who dispute it. So there it is. It's now a part of international law. It just won't die.
Sir, patanong lang ng office, what do you say to the critics who say that lumambot daw po yung posisyon ng gobyerno, ng administrasyon natin dun sa issue ng territory sa West Philippine Sea because we wanted to get loans and grants and favor from China?
That's not true. I would have if I had heard of that. Then it's an acceptance, as quite a few really eloquent members and very. How would I put this? Because you're not allowed to talk about each member. But just imagine the proudest, most intensely nationalistic members. They all want a modus vivendi in the South China Sea, a reduction of tensions, an avoidance of adventurous moves, because they all want to move forward while not giving up anything. So I don't know. Well, as I said, different people go to different schools, and some people see it that way. As I said, international law never changes until, I'll tell you a theoretical thing. What if a similar issue were to come up in another part of the world? This is just my guess. And the court did not. The court has also, I believe, has to follow precedent, right? As in the common law. But what if it starts modifying its understanding of maritime features? It's only in that manner that you change international law, and usually it's very incremental.
Last question na lang, sir. Sir, since you believe that non-verbals do not accomplish anything.
Well, as far as I was concerned, in the UN, yes.
Yes, sir. So under your leadership, sir, how will the Philippines bring up the government's objections to China's developments?
Then you'll have to hear me speak from my forum, the Department of Foreign Affairs. That's how you'll learn it. And I think that's better than filing notes. It began, by the way, with my inaugural statement when I took office. That's rather stronger than anything any of the critics have said. They're rather like that.
Hi, sir. Just one last.
They lack a bit of backbone.
Nat
Yeah.
Mariano po from Manila Standard. Sir,
Yes.
you mentioned earlier there are still pending visits po. Are there already details on Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to the country next week?
Well, we're working on that. There's a whole list here of things to talk about, and it's we're still finalizing it. And I have to go to Papua New Guinea for APEC. Well, of course, I'll rush back immediately to finalize them. That's put in my hands.
Okay, sir. Thank you po.
Thank you.
Last question, sir. Before
Yes.
my one cup of rice question. So there were a few strong statements coming from the U.S. State Department about the South China Sea or against China. Was there any instance during in any of the meetings with the dialogue partners that Mr. Pence ever mentioned in Chinese Premier Li Keqiang's face about the statements?
No, it was mentioned. Stop me if I'm not allowed. It's part of ASEAN. I'm sorry. I mean, if it was up to me, you know how I am. But it was emphasized that the two major partners of Southeast Asia are the United States and China, just in terms of market power. And in reaction to that description of a fact, Pence said yes. That is also what the United States believes, and you will see it reflected in American foreign policy and statements, and that President Trump and President Xi Jinping have good talks when the occasion arises. So in that situation, we don't want to get ahead of the main actors, the main protagonists. So we work with that.
So my one cup of rice question. How are you?
What's a one cup of?
So what's your assessment to the
I think
overall?
want to subtly bring up the rice problem, right?
After all, what has been said and done,
Yeah.
the flux and all, your assessment to the overall attendance of the president to the 23rd or 33rd ASEAN Summit now is about to be closed anytime soon.
Well, his attendance, you mean?
Yes, overall.
I thought overall it was more than he should have done, frankly. As I said, the scenarios are set because that's how ASEAN proceeds. We don't do things spontaneously. It was enough if I could have done it. But no, he insisted. Again, like this morning, just taps me and says, "It's my chair." So then he gets it. That's how it goes. So I was going to say something. Yeah. There was one thing. In these discussions, there seems to be, again, the experts are there seems to be more freedom to speak than we ever thought was possible. Because ASEAN has a long tradition. It is a foreign affairs, specialty. But so the sense we had is that, everything is structured. But in the course of listening to them, and the reason why we cannot release statements that were said was precisely because apparently you can speak freely. Well, we didn't know that. So maybe and obviously in the next one, that will happen if you're, if you retain an abiding interest in ASEAN. Next ones will be more exciting. But again, as they speak, the reason they speak freely is that it's not reported. Yeah, but we came in there with an exaggerated sense of formality as to what can be done.
Okay, with that point, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Sure. Go ahead.
Last questions from me, sir.
One second, then, because if there's
Yes, sir,
time,
very quick,
what
sir.
the hell? What's next? Go back. Oh, come on, okay. Okay. What's the next one? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Sir,
Yeah,
on
yes,
the
go ahead.
yes, sir.
Go ahead.
On the Rohingya issue, sir, can you tell us
what?
what Rohingya issue in Myanmar?
Rohingya issue.
Yeah, what are the new developments to be taken by ASEAN
Okay.
on this?
Stop me if please. This is ASEAN. This is bigger than me. Yes. The first thing that happened was we had a dinner, foreign ministers, and this issue was raised. And the at the UN, the foreign affairs minister of Singapore said something I wish we had said in my time, but we did not. He said, and this was brought up when we failed to achieve consensus on the Rakhine issue. Alan Cayetano was leading it, pressing for it, but it's consensus. And someone stood up and stepped away from the table. So it became a Philippine statement of concern. He said, I remember we said last year, but no statement came out. Either ASEAN owns this problem or outsiders will own it. So we will do our best now to come in and there are mechanisms. I don't know. Again, we'll have to ask the experts. But we have to be active in the humanitarian aspect. I mean, physical presence, and not just going in and visiting, but being there. I believe there's an organization for that, and so that's our commitment now. And it was welcomed by the State Councilor Suchi. Yeah.
And my final, sir, can you tell us, sir, about the planned ASEAN-Russia Youth Summit to be held next year in the Philippines? It was...
I don't know. It was mentioned, yeah.
It was mentioned. No details yet.
No, I don't know the details about that, really. Do you know? Please, yes, go ahead. Ma'am.
Yes, this event is going to be hosted by the Philippines in partnership with Russia, and it was mentioned by President Putin himself in his intervention. Right. It's going to be held first quarter of 2019.
Wow.
Yes, early next year.
And I presume, what's the venue?
Still being discussed.
Still being discussed, but by then we will have done Clark, I think. Clark's facilities will be up by then, I think, for that, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am? No. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Don't tap me. I'll sing with you. Okay. Thanks a lot. Thank you.